The United States Senate is one of the great deliberative bodies in the world. Two senators from each state come to the north wing of the Capitol building to discuss matters of national importance and pass bills that may one day become law. Like all deliberative bodies, in order to function relatively smoothly, it must follow a set of rules and procedures. One of these rules, cloture, allows a vote of 60 senators to end debate and prompt a vote. It can end a filibuster, an infamous procedure by which a single senator stops Senate business as long as he or she stands and talks, without yielding the floor. The U.S. Senate, of course, is named after and often inspired by another great deliberative body in world history, the Roman Senate. Who was in this body? Where did it meet? What did they do, and how did they do it? The answers to these questions, of course, changed over the hundreds of years of Rome's history. The histories of Sallust, letters of Cicero, and the biographies of Suetonius mean we are best informed about the heyday of the Roman Senate, the 1st century BCE. So I will tell you about the Senate in that time period, which is also famous as the end of the Republic. Unlike the American Senate, the Roman Senate was not representative. It was comprised of all former magistrates. Roman citizens elected officials to serve one-year terms, and the magistrates proceeded up the cursus honorum, the racetrack of offices. They started as quaestors or tribunes, then moved up to be aediles, praetors, and consuls over the years. With each step up the ladder, there were fewer openings. Therefore, the consul was the most coveted position in the Roman state, and the consulares, the former consuls, were the most respected members of the Senate. None of the magistrates or senators were paid a salary. They were public-spirited individuals, usually from a small group of families who had held office for generations. They sought office for personal glory, power, and the occasional benefits of embezzlement. They were the city and empire's administrators, judges, and generals. Only some of Rome's magistrates could summon the Senate. This right was reserved for praetors and consuls. During special circumstances, a praefectus urbi was appointed to oversee the city of Rome, and this prefect could call a meeting of the Senate. In an emergency, a dictator could be appointed, and he could also summon the Senate. There were only two dictators in the 1st century, Sulla and Julius Caesar. Once an official decided to summon the Senate, he needed to appoint a meeting place. The Senate could meet in any templum, or space designated as sacred within the city. As a side note, Romans used the word ides to refer to the buildings we call temples. These ides were also templa. Therefore, the Senate often met in various temples around the city. The Temple of Castor in the Roman Forum was a common meeting place. So was the Curia in the northwestern corner of the Forum. The Curia was a templum and had an altar of victory where the senators sacrificed at the beginning of their meetings. Sometimes the choice of meeting place was carefully stage-managed. For example, on the 8th of November 63 BCE, the consul Cicero summoned the Senate to the Temple of Jupiter Stator, or Jupiter the Stayer, on the Capitoline Hill. This temple was easily defensible, and where the Senate met during moments of grave danger for the state. That night, Cicero denounced Catiline, another senator, for conspiring to overthrow the Roman state. On the day of the meetings, the senators arrived, sacrificed, and got down to business, and all of the business for that day was required to end by sunset. Formally, the Senate was comprised of 600 men, but not everyone attended every meeting. Approximately 400 senators appear to have been in normal attendance, and 200 senators was an impressive turnout around the Saturnalia holidays in the month of December. At each meeting, the official who summoned the Senate also presided over it. He introduced an issue, some initial thoughts, and possibly a proposal or sententia. He then asked for the opinions of others. He would start with the princeps senatus, the chief man of the Senate, usually a close family member or well-respected former consul. Then the Senate would hear the opinions of each former magistrate, starting with the most well-respected consul and ending with the lowest former quaestor. The presiding magistrate usually followed the same speaking order that he had requested at the meeting on the 1st of January. Each senator could share their thoughts or make a proposal to be voted on. Presumably, many senators, especially the younger or less famous ones, deferred to previous more important speakers. It is also clear that not all senators' comments stayed relevant to the topic at hand. Cato the Elder ended every speech with Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed, and several senators used a filibuster to obstruct the Senate's action on a topic. Similarly, the Senate could be prevented from acting if a tribune of the plebs vetoed their action. The presiding officer chose what proposals to vote on. According to Aulus Gellius, there were two methods for voting: by division, if there is agreement, and if not, by asking the opinion of each senator. According to the first method, senators literally stood together and the larger group won the vote. This would usually be a commonly held or prevailing opinion. This method of voting inspires Cicero's question of Catiline. Finally, with what spirit do you think you ought to endure this, that at your arrival those benches were vacated, that all the former consuls, who you had often marked out for slaughter, once you sat down, left behind that part of the benches, bare and empty? According to the other voting method, each senator votes on the measure, presumably in the same order that they spoke. Once a motion is carried, it becomes a senatorial decree. This decree is recorded by a clerk in the presence of several senators, including the senator who made the initial proposal. It is deposited in the records. Depending on the topic, a citizen assembly may need to vote on the measure, or the decree may need to be sent to other cities and magistrates in the empire. Theoretically, the Senate was advisory and could discuss any matter. In practice, their decrees often carried the force of law, and officials usually followed them. For example, in 100 BCE, the Senate ordered the consul Marius to kill Saturninus and Glaucia, two tribunes of the plebs, even though the tribunes' somewhat radical proposals would have greatly strengthened Marius's political position. Marius followed the Senate's orders. Magistrates governing or waging war outside of Italy, however, were less inclined to follow the Senate's orders because they were more informed of the matters in their own province than the Senate was, because it was hundreds of miles away. Nevertheless, the Senate was particularly involved in foreign policy, receiving embassies and ambassadors, deciding the privileges and rights of cities within the empire, declaring war and ratifying treaties. For this reason, provincial governors sometimes wrote the Senate for advice, and cities appealed to either the governor or the Senate, depending on who could possibly provide a better outcome.